Welcome to Thrive with Pride by Age Options, an inclusive online space for LGBT plus older adults and those who care for them. This is a recording of a live event held on Zoom, which included a Q&A segment that was not recorded. This month, we welcomed Mike Ziri, Director of Public Policy at Equality Illinois, the state's LGBTQ plus civil rights organization. At a time of unprecedented, hateful, and harmful attacks on the rights of LGBTQ plus people across the country, Mike presented about the challenges LGBTQ plus people experience in Illinois, how the state continues to advance pro-equality, pro-family policies that support and affirm LGBTQ plus people, and ways that community members can engage in advocacy to build a better Illinois. Please see the video description below for a PDF of the slides presented in the recording and other helpful resources.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for inviting me to join you today on this very chilly morning, but I'm excited to meet with you all and talk about policy and legislation and how Illinois is doing. And thanks for that introduction, Nina. Mike Ziri, he, him, from Equality Illinois. Equality Illinois is the state's LGBTQ plus civil rights organization. I'll just dive in. For those who aren't familiar, Equality Illinois, we've been around since 1991. I've been part of the team since January of 2015. So I'm coming up on my nine-year anniversary in January. Love every minute of the work we do, advancing justice for LGBTQ plus folks in Illinois. Building a better state, reinforcing our civil rights, our human rights protections here, and really, really pushing forward on, creative and innovative ways to advance equality and inclusion, and some of which I'll talk about today. So just want to jump right in, initially talking about the national landscape when it comes to LGBTQ plus equality and justice, and, that we're seeing a very, hostile anti-LGBTQ plus landscape across the country. More than 600 anti-LGBTQ plus bills have been introduced in state capitals around the United States, including some bills have been introduced in Springfield. And in some of these cases, these bills have passed and become law. These are initiatives like bans on gender affirming care for trans youth, or banning public schools from even talking about the existence of queer people. And now there's actually a new bill in Florida to also ban the workplace, private workplaces, from having any kind of discussion or positive representation of LGBTQ plus people in the workplace. So we're seeing these types of legislation across the country, really hostile, climate right now. There have been some progress here and there, but we really are seeing this wave of anti-LGBTQ plus attacks across the country, and also connected to the Dobbs decision from last June. The Dobbs decision is the U.S. Supreme Court decision that overturned and repealed Roe versus Wade. LGBTQ plus rights are reproductive rights. Reproductive rights and LGBTQ plus rights are linked together by the right to privacy, the right to bodily autonomy, the right to form our own families as we see fit and as we choose. We believe Justice Clarence Thomas, when he wrote in his concurrence in the Dobbs decision, that in the future, the Supreme Court should reconsider really major decisions, Griswold, which is the right to contraception, Lawrence v. Texas, which was the national decision in 2003 that decriminalized same-sex relationships across the country, and then Obergefell, which was the national marriage equality decision in 2015. Justice Thomas has said we should look at these and reconsider these and overturn these. And so, the attacks we're seeing are not just happening in state capitals; they're also happening in the courts, as we saw with the Dobbs decision last year. I just want to highlight this map to show you where Illinois is in the constellation of states. Um, the states that are in the dark tan or the tannish color, are states that have banned outright gender affirming care for trans youth. States, and this is medically appropriate care, medically necessary in consultation with healthcare providers and families. And these states have just banned this essential life-saving care, this healthcare. As you see, Illinois is for the most part surrounded. Iowa, Missouri, Kentucky, Indiana. Um, and the Wisconsin legislature has passed a ban on gender affirming care for youth. But the governor of Wisconsin has said he would veto it. So, we'll see what happens in Wisconsin. But we, for the most part, Illinois is surrounded by anti-LGBTQ plus states. And I think that highlights why it's more important than ever that we keep Illinois moving forward with our protections. You'll see in this map that there's a little shield when it comes to Illinois, and that shield, and you see that in other states as well. That shield is indicative of legislation that was passed earlier this year by the Illinois General Assembly called the Patient and Provider Protection Act. And what that law does is it puts in place protections in Illinois for individuals who come to Illinois, whether to provide access to reproductive health care, gender affirming care, or come here to seek access to gender affirming care and reproductive health care. It provides some protections if they then return to their home state and that home state decides to launch a prosecution or an investigation of them. It puts in place protections of how Illinois would respond to that prosecution. So we want to make sure we're protecting folks who are coming to Illinois to seek access to lawful health care, including access to abortion, access to reproductive health care, access to gender affirming care. And to just really also highlight that when I say LGBTQ plus rights are reproductive rights, this is a map of states that have put in place, as of early October, restrictions or outright bans on abortion in the United States. And you see Illinois is largely surrounded again by hostile states that have put in place, anti-reproductive rights, anti-choice laws. And so it's really, incredibly important then why Illinois continues to be protective. And I just put the two maps together here to show you. And I want this to indicate that the same forces, the same anti-equality, anti-family groups that oppose reproductive health care also oppose gender affirming care. And it's one more reason why the fight for LGBTQ plus rights must be broad and inclusive, and based on a large coalition. And so, also what we're seeing nationally is, an increase in anti-LGBTQ plus bias incidents, anti-LGBTQ plus hate crimes, spurred on by the legislation we're seeing. You see the headline there, after Florida passed the Don't Say LGBTQ plus bill about 2 or 3 years ago, online anti-LGBTQ hate surged 400%. This has manifested itself also in, physical violence. A pro-equality bakery in McHenry County, last summer was vandalized and attacked and had anti-LGBTQ slurs spray painted on the brick wall and the windows smashed. So Illinois is not immune to this hate. To be clear, hatred is not an Illinois value, but Illinois is not immune to this extremism and this violence that we're witnessing across the country. But also do want to highlight that when it comes to LGBTQ plus equality and inclusion, Illinois has been a leader. Going back to 1924, when Illinois in Chicago was the site of the first gay rights organization in the United States, the Society for Human Rights, founded by Henry Gerber. That was in 1924. And then in 1961, Illinois was the first state to decriminalize same-sex relationships. And so Illinois has been a leader, and there are many other ways Illinois has been leading. These are just some of the pieces of legislation that we at Equality Illinois, working in great coalitions, because this work, none of this, affirming pro-equality work gets done by any one group or any one person. It is led in coalition with amazing champions in the legislature and amazing partners in the community across the state. But these are just some of the examples of some of the great laws that have been passed in recent years. You know, the Illinois HIV Action Alliance, which includes AIDS Foundation Chicago and Pride Action Tank, and many other organizations, worked to repeal the state's HIV criminalization law back in 2021. We were the second state to fully repeal HIV criminalization law. You know, that the first state was Texas about 25, 30 years ago, different governor then, different legislature in Texas. But, you know, about 30 states have similar laws still on the books. But Illinois was the second state to fully repeal. You know, we were one of the first bills I got to lobby for as a member of the Equality Illinois team was Representative Cassidy's bill to ban conversion therapy and protect LGBTQ plus youth. That was 2015. And since then, we've also worked on bills for, you know, expanding access to all gender restrooms, you know, really creating new learning standards for inclusive sexual health education in schools, you know, updating our laws around identity documents, birth certificates, driver's licenses, et cetera, to help, you know, remove barriers to access for trans and non-binary and gender expansive folks. And these are just some of the examples. There's many more initiatives, but just wanted to highlight a couple of the bills. You know, also want to really celebrate that 2023 is the 10th anniversary of the Illinois legislature and Governor Quinn passing and signing the state's marriage equality law. In Illinois, marriage equality is rooted and grounded in state law. It's not based on a court decision. It is in state law here. And so it is, you know, I want to celebrate that we've had 10 years of marriage equality here. And you can see some photos here of the huge, you know, rally march for marriage equality in Springfield in October of 2013. And you see here Governor Quinn signing the marriage bill on November 20th of 2013. So just, you know, the 10-year anniversary was a few weeks ago. And then also another big significant piece of legislation, which I am proud to have really worked on, is the bill that we passed in 2019 to require that public schools teach the contributions of LGBTQ plus people in history. We are one of 6 states to have this affirmative, proactive requirement. You see that in the Midwest, we are the only state that has this requirement. And, you know, some states have the exact opposite requirement, like Florida and other states that outright ban the inclusion of LGBTQ plus content in public schools. But in Illinois, we are showing that a different vision of an inclusive world is possible. And so really proud of this initiative, and really want to highlight the leadership of 2 organizations, the Illinois Safe Schools Alliance and the Legacy Project, which are, you know, were key partners in the effort to get the law passed in 2018 and 2019, and which are key advocates now in helping schools implement the law. They've developed professional development modules. They have developed lesson plans for teachers. But really want to highlight this initiative and highlight why it's so important to demonstrate that LGBTQ plus people have made important contributions and been part of the fabric of society for, you know, for forever, and why it's important for LGBTQ plus youth to be able to see themselves represented in the history they're taught in public schools. And then one other bill that, excuse me, one other initiative that we supported this year, led by the Illinois Secretary of State, Alexi Giannoulias, fighting book banning and censorship in libraries here in Illinois. You know, we've seen these efforts across the country. Again, Illinois is not immune to this extremism. We have seen library boards, we have seen school boards be attacked. We have seen efforts by anti-equality, anti-family groups to ban, you know, the diverse collections in these libraries. And so Secretary Giannoulias, who was just took office in January of this year, a lot of folks don't realize, but one of his roles as Secretary of State is the state librarian. and really standing up and championing, democracy, access to diverse collections, the ability of librarians to do their job, and ensure diverse collections in their systems. But he advocated for legislation requiring libraries and their boards to have written policies in opposition to book banning and censorship in order to qualify for state grants. His office administers about $61 million in grants every year. And so this was a first in the nation bill that he advocated for, and State Rep Stava Murray and State Senator Laura Murphy championed in the legislature, and Governor Pritzker signed at the Harold Washington Library here at the Chicago Public Library System. So an important bill, really keeping Illinois at the forefront of what it means to be LGBTQ plus inclusive, but also just broadly inclusive of communities of color, immigrant and refugee communities, historically marginalized communities, making sure that the stories are being told and part of collections in libraries. But there is more work to do in Illinois, and want to highlight some of the information. When we just conducted our strategic planning process and our board adopted our new strategic plan earlier this year, we did community surveys, town halls, and really engaged many LGBTQ plus folks across the state, allies, different community leaders. What makes folks proud to be from Illinois, but where is the pain still? And this is some of the things we learned. It's really highlighting the work that we are going to keep focused on. We also do want to continue to highlight and focus on the violence against LGBTQ plus, particularly against trans folks of color, and working with our partners to how can we stem that violence, how can we prevent that violence and stop it from happening. And one way this looks like is supporting initiatives for gun violence prevention. So we support our partners at GPAC and other organizations, the Brady campaign, when it comes to initiatives to prevent gun violence. But other areas we heard pain in, inequalities in the criminal legal system, lack of access to affirming healthcare, and economic inequalities and injustices. And when it comes, let me put all these statistics up here so you can all see them. I'm not going to read through all of them, but we know LGBTQ people are disproportionately criminalized, experience less public safety, less likely to, while more likely to experience violent attacks and victimization, less likely to call the police when they need help, particularly trans folks. 56% of trans folks do not call the police when they need help, more likely to be incarcerated, more likely to be stopped by the police. So these are some of the things, the areas we heard concerns about in the criminal legal system space. It looks at economic inequality. 25% of LGBTQ plus folks in Illinois experience poverty. 30% of trans folks experience poverty. And so that's why you will see Equality Illinois supporting initiatives like raising the state's minimum wage to $15 an hour, or supporting, just a few weeks ago, we supported the ordinance in the Chicago City Council for expanded paid time off. It's why we support initiatives like, Bring Chicago Home, because we know the impacts of economic inequality and, the disproportionate impact of homelessness and housing insecurity on LGBTQ plus folks. And then, the healthcare sector, healthcare system, lack of access to affirming healthcare. One of the statistic that always sticks out to me here is that 24% of trans Illinoisans do not go see a doctor when they need to because of, fear of mistreatment as because their gender identity. And we know that lack of culturally competent care, that discriminatory those actions are not unique to trans folks, and it's one reason why when we looked at this, the needs here, we focused this year on a piece of legislation that I really want to highlight are requiring cultural competency training for healthcare providers. And we worked with a broad coalition on this initiative, including, organizations that advocate for people with disabilities, communities of color, immigrant and refugee communities, different faith communities, because we know the need for culturally competent health training in healthcare is broad and inclusive. And so we worked on this legislation, and now, because of the legislation, which has been signed by the governor, Illinois, as of 2025, will require cultural competency, at least 1 hour of cultural competency education when healthcare providers take their continuing education hours. And when I say healthcare providers, I want to be clear, that's very broad. It includes, physicians, it includes nurses, it includes dentists, podiatrists, it includes social workers who are, of course, already doing this cultural competency training. It includes a broad range of healthcare providers, behavioral healthcare analysts, et cetera. And that was important to us because we know, that communities go to see different kinds of providers for different purposes and different needs. And so we wanted to make sure that those provisions were, as broad as possible. And so really excited about this piece of legislation. It's an important step towards access to affirming healthcare, and wanted to highlight for y'all today. And then another piece of legislation that I want to highlight that was passed last year with SAGE, the National LGBTQ plus older adult advocacy organization, Pride Action Tank, AARP Illinois, many other partners, was the initiative sponsored by State Senator Karina Villa and State Representative Lakeisha Collins to disrupt disparities for LGBTQ plus older adults and older adults living with HIV. And this bill did three things. It created the state's Commission on LGBTQ plus older adults. It requires that for direct service providers who are funded by the state, including by the Illinois Department on Aging, it requires that those providers, that all of their employees and vendors take LGBTQ plus older adult cultural competency training through the Department on Aging. And it requires the Department on Aging to have a dedicated LGBTQ plus older adult advocate on the department's team. And that was a first in the nation provision about the older adult advocate at a state Department on Aging. And so really excited about this legislation. Not to call anyone out, but I think Don Bell joined, and Don joined this conversation today. And I know Don is the leading the efforts for the Commission on LGBTQ plus older adults for the state of Illinois. So I wanted to highlight Don's leadership with that. And you really just wanted to elevate this bill to make sure you're all aware. And this builds on a couple other initiatives that the coalition I mentioned has worked on, including back in 2019, designating Illinois as the third state in the nation to designate LGBTQ plus older adults as a population of greatest social need. And then also Illinois designating older adults living with HIV as a community of greatest social need. We were the first in the nation to designate older adults living with HIV as a community of greatest social need. And what that just simply means is that when it indicates to, direct service providers that when, y'all build programming out, you should make sure you're including and identifying the needs and access to services for LGBTQ plus older adults and older adults living with HIV. So we've had some really, really great success in passing legislation and laws to support LGBTQ plus older adults and older adults living with HIV, and wanted to just highlight those to you today. Having said all that and having all these great laws on the books here in Illinois, do want to continue to stress that we can't, as our CEO Brian always says, we can't only clean our part of the pool. And this is a general map of the United States from the Movement Advancement Project, kind of ranking states when it comes to their LGBTQ plus equality. And Illinois is a strong equality state. But we can't just rest on our past victories. We have to keep moving forward, and we have to keep moving forward both for folks living in Illinois, but also for those folks who are coming to Illinois seeking healthcare, seeking the protection of our laws from their hostile anti-LGBTQ states. And I think we also have to keep moving forward because by passing innovative laws like the LGBTQ plus history in schools bill, like the disrupting disparities for LGBTQ plus older adults law, we are showing another vision is possible where to these states that are extremely hostile to LGBTQ plus rights. And so I think it's really important that we keep in mind we can't only clean our part of the pool, and that also means that yes, supporting organizations in Illinois like Pride Action Tank and other organizations, but also helping support organizations in other states as well, like Equality Florida, like Equality Texas, like Promo in Missouri. Helping make sure that the fight is joined across the country. Which kind of leads me to like, well, what's next for Illinois? A couple things I do want to just highlight. One is I mentioned earlier the new standards that we passed as a coalition in 2021 for age-appropriate, inclusive, medically accurate personal health and safety education and sexual health education. The problem, that those standards are really important. The issue still remains that it's up to each individual public school district if they want to teach the content. And new data has come out this year from the State Board of Education. 72% of school districts in Illinois are not providing this content to their students. And so we continue to work in partnership with great organizations like Planned Parenthood and others to keep to keep the focus in the legislature on that we have to require this again, age appropriate, medically accurate, inclusive personal health and safety education, sexual health education, teaching about healthy relationships, teaching about teaching young people how to be safe, and understand their own health needs. And so it's continue to be a big push for us to require public schools to provide this education. We are also working on legislation to require nonprofits in Illinois to report out on the demographic diversity of their boards of directors. We already require this when it comes to state boards and commissions. Every year, the governor has to issue a report on the demographic diversity of state boards and commissions. Every year, the private sector, the corporate boards have to report this information out. So we're working on legislation to require that that require the nonprofit sector to do the same. And then the other big initiative we're working on is how can we help keep sex workers safe in Illinois? We see that 75% of sex workers will experience violence during their course of their careers, and that 2/3 of all the trans folks killed were sex workers. So how can we ensure that we're keeping sex workers safe, and looking at what the decriminalization of sex work in Illinois? This is part of a campaign that is being led by and where we're being advised by current and former sex workers, particularly trans women of color, and it's something we're looking at as a multi-year campaign. So I did want to highlight just those three campaigns we're working on for the coming few months and years. And there will always be other initiatives that pop up, as we always seek to strengthen our laws here in Illinois and ensure that we are being as protective as possible across the country. And I want to say that none of this progress happens without all of your advocacy. As I mentioned earlier, it requires broad coalitions, broad advocacy. It requires folks lobbying legislators telling your stories, advocating to your school boards, your library boards, your park boards, and also, of course, voting. We're coming up to an important election here in the coming the coming year. And it's no hyperbole to say that, all it takes is one bad election for Illinois to start going the other way. And that can happen if folks, if pro-equality voters do not get out there and take action. But really want to just highlight that again, none of this happens without all of your advocacy. And there are several ways I just want to highlight that, that you can take action. One is every year we have an advocacy day. And we're going to be publishing and publicizing that soon, where folks go to Springfield, we connect you with your legislators, you tell them about the issues we're working on, why they're important to you. So that's one way of taking action. We also do regular action alerts. Just today, we did an action alert by email, urging folks to tell their legislator why it's important to require that public schools teach age-appropriate, medically accurate, and inclusive sexual health education and personal health and safety education. If you want to volunteer, we also have volunteer opportunities. Our big one is our Gala coming up on February 3rd. And I can drop some links in the chat if you were interested in registering to volunteer. Our Gala is a huge event where we are going to be honoring one of our partner organizations in the fight. We're going to be honoring Equality Texas, and we're going to be honoring trans trailblazer Precious Brady Davis, who serves on the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District here in Cook County. So we're going to be honoring Precious Brady Davis and Equality Texas. It's just a really impactful event, where we celebrate our successes, but also rededicate ourselves to the work that must go on. And so we always have about 120 volunteers at that event. That could be a great way to engage as well. So there's a couple of different ways to engage. But I always want to highlight, since policy is my work, advocacy to your state elected officials, advocacy to your state representative, to your state senator, telling your stories, why issues matter is so important. And you have such power in your ability in that telling your story. And so, also, just want to end my part, my slide deck, just by highlighting some of the organizations that do really great work in the community across the state. And these are organizations across the state. This is a slice. This is not comprehensive, but great organizations doing great work across the state.
Thanks again to Mike Ziri for joining us this month. Don't forget to check out the video description below for slides from his presentation, other helpful resources, and a brief survey. Due to the holidays, we will not be hosting an online plenary in December 2023. We will ring in the new year on January 23rd, 2024, with a focus group specifically for LGBT+ older adults in suburban Cook County. Whether you have attended a Thrive with Pride event before or not, we welcome your valuable input on meaningful programs and ways to reach LGBT+ older adults in our area. And we encourage you to bring a friend. As an incentive for your participation, we will be raffling off 2 age options swag packs. Pre-registration is highly encouraged. Sign up for email reminders of future events at www.thrivingwithpride.org. And again, please don't forget to fill out our survey so that we can continue to provide and improve our programming. Thanks for watching.